Her name is Mahsa Amini. In Iran, Kurdish names are forbidden, and hence why we know her as Mahsa Amini. There is so many, alhamdulillah, beautiful videos going around the internet right now creating awareness for this tragic story. So I want to share with you one that I feel does the most justice.
She's just 22 years old, and police say she died of a heart attack. But this is what really happened. Mahsa Amini was just riding the subway with her brother. She was so excited to be in the big city and visit her relative. But when she got off the train and started walking outside, the police grabbed her and dragged her into a van. Her brother tried to stop them, but they took off to what they claim is a 1-hour re-education class because she was improperly wearing a hijab. Her brother sprinted over to the detention center and waited for her when suddenly he heard screams coming from inside. He started banging on the doors, terrified for his sister inside, but police came out with batons and tear gas and attacked him. 5 minutes later, an ambulance rushed right by him. Police told him an officer was injured, but a woman who was also inside told him that a girl was killed. So he started sprinting to the hospital and they let him in, but security forces surrounded him so he couldn't take pictures of her. And that's when he saw his sister. She was declared brain dead and in a coma. The Iranian government published blurry and edited footage of a woman falling to the ground saying Mahsa had had a heart attack, but they refused to publish footage inside that van. And that's because several girls who were also inside that van with Mahsa called her dad and told him she was attacked inside that van.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, I have played you that clip beforehand, a minute and 30, 15, 20 seconds, so you can have an idea of the conversation that's going on. I am in heavy conflict in everything that's going on there. First and foremost, let me be absolutely clear. I utterly and unconditionally condemn the morality police. They are vile, disgusting human beings who every single one of them should be taken out around the back of the chemical sheds and shot. And I'm going to say that on YouTube, and I may get flagged for that, but I feel that my nerves are a little raw about it. The entire morality police of Iran should be taken out and dealt with in its entirety. The burning of the hijab is something that I have a problem with because it is a massive symbol inside of that of Islam. It is a symbol of piety. It is a symbol of women's unity, Islamically speaking. So it has an impactful opinion on many of our sisters in Islam. Many who struggle to have time with the hijab. And this is because Iran is an absolute psychopathic regime. A regime that is designed to harm its people, who wields our religion like a club. And disregards women's rights in Islam by its entirety, stealing a young lady from her brother, beating him with batons when she dies, leading towards mass protests. And we can't ignore the fact that there is all of this horror coming out of Iran. And the Ayatollah does not give a fuck. Let's be fair. The Ayatollah does not care. All right, let's speak it as fact. That man does not give a fuck that a Kurdish girl has died. He does not care. We care. The Iranian people care. The Iranian people are good people. So we know this shit is real. We know the Ayatollah, but we also must take into account that Western media are going to feed on this. And they're going to try and benefit the Western liberal agenda. And I caution you, yes, sisters, be angry, but be careful about how you draw your information. Please be careful how you draw your information. Because the West will try to spin this. The West will try to demonize Islam through the disgusting actions of one of the worst Muslim-run countries in the world. Yeah? Because it's not a Muslim nation. This isn't a Muslim nation per se, in the understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rules involving how we should behave, given to us by the Quran and the Hadiths. Right? The Shias have, some warped view of how a theocracy would operate, and it's absolutely insane. It's beyond insane. Beating innocent women, getting off trains for an hour re-education on how to reposition a hijab, having a heart attack. No, she was physically assaulted, beaten, brain dead, murdered A beautiful young woman was murdered. Yes, women have a right to be angry. Yes, our sisters have a right to be angry. The hijab does not necessarily need to be that simple. I am saying this because of the imagery that the hijab has for our believing sisters and how important it is to our believing sisters. And I'm not saying that this is a fucking easy thing to have a discussion about, but we need to have a discussion about it. We need to stop shielding psychopathic regimes like Saudi Arabia, who are allies to America. Because the Saudis engage in a lesser form of the same shit that is going on in Iran right now. And it's because Iran and Saudi Arabia have these geographical, regional power shakes between each other that leads to this level of paranoia in both their police forces that abuse minorities and innocent people in both countries. And it's because of people like America's superstate. People don't realise this. The nature of much of the Middle East's political shitstorm is based around Western ideological power. And I can condemn the Iranian psychopaths, and every single one of their morality police should be taken out and hanged. Fuck it, I said what I said. But at the same time, how did Iran get to be this theocratical nightmare? Answer: Western intervention, Western sanctions, Western psychological warfare. You know, and we cannot take away where this mess comes from. Historically, you have to look back. And every time we have one of these tragedies, we have to look at the root cause. And the root cause is American imperialism. And people can be as angry as hell about that conversation, but it is. And American imperialism is real and alive today as it was during the British Empire, when it was British imperialism. Persia is under an act of incredible paranoia. So Saudi Arabia is feeding that paranoia through the lenses of American imperialism. Because we all know the Americans want the oil. We all know the Americans want nothing more than the money, the value, the disgusting greed that exists in America. So in essence, this young lady's tragedy is absolutely the responsibility of the Iranian police. It's absolutely the responsibility of the psychotic Iranian government. But how did we get here? And there is always a Western agenda. And that's why the algorithm and much of the media is spinning in this direction. Yes, our sisters have a right to be angry. It's entirely within their right to do so. Our sisters have a right to be furious at the situation that's been caused here. But I need my brothers and sisters to pay attention to where this came from. Persia would not be in the state she's in today if not for Western interventionism. Iraq, the paranoia of the Iranian elite is based around the insanity of Western interventionism. And if you don't believe that, you're a lot more deluded than I thought you were. Because let's be fair, that's true. The Iranians would not act in this level of cultural insanity of puritanism if not for the pressure applied internationally. Persia used to have its own empires. Persia didn't give a fuck about multiple different cultural groups back in its imperial days. And the reason they didn't care is because they were allowed to flourish. They were allowed to speak, to trade, to influence. Nowadays, no one is allowed international influence unless you have nukes. And even Russia's being challenged in that right now. Unless you are on the Western powers' tit. Or unless you have something so valuable, the West has to give you some iota of power. And it can. You can see the connotations of many of these problems through the lenses of Western power in how it is played out in the Middle East. And the hype in the media and online has a lot to do. And there's a lot of Americans talking about this. As you noticed, the Arab Irish lady who's stitching a video clearly of an American man, and it's the American man's narrative that we should be careful about. Yes, our sisters have a right to be angry. Yes, our Persian brothers and sisters have a right to protest. Yes, we should unconditionally support the removal and beheading, in my opinion, of the Iranian apparatus. And I'm a Muslim. I can't stand Western imperialism. But the regime in Iran and in Saudi Arabia are morally fucking bankrupt. Morally bankrupt. The Crown Prince has, concerts with Quranic verses on them. And people shaking their butts. Oh, to be Lama Shaitana regime. So I fundamentally believe that this is a whole packaged mess. And you cannot address the problems in Iran without addressing Saudi Arabia, without addressing Israel, without addressing the United States' imperialism. And that's the problem. We must always look at the larger picture. The tragedy that has been caused is entirely at the fault of the morality police. But why are there a morality police? Answer: imperialism pressure that has created paranoia, that has involved Iran and in many ways Saudi Arabia and other countries like it to consider themselves under a pressure cooker. I wish Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes this young lady into heaven. It is painful to see what's happened. And I wish her family the best and justice. But I don't think we'll see it. What we'll see is another Iranian crackdown. We will see another breach of freedom of rights and expressions and histories. We will see shock troops. The Ayatollah will lose his patience at some point, or his patience with the protest will thin, no matter how many politicians have stood up. And there are quite a few, that's quite brave of them, Persian politicians who have actually said that the morality police should be removed. There is no compulsion in religion, brothers and sisters. You cannot force people to wear hijab. You can't. You can advise the sisters. You can talk to the sisters. You can articulate to the sisters. You can explain why Allah wishes them to have the hijab. You cannot force them. People can call me a deviant for that, but I fundamentally believe that our faith must come from the heart and must be believed in. Otherwise, it's not our faith. It's coercion. And that's why I rail against the West, because I will not be forced to conform into their ideology. I have charted my own path. So I stand irrevocably by the opinion that you can advise, you can explain to the sisters why the hijab is mandatory, why it's required Islamically, but you cannot force them. You cannot force them. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. May Allah forgive us all for the state of this ummah. For we are really, truly in a sorry state. And may He have mercy upon us. And I don't want to be hearing the doctrine of our more pious cousins about Allah will not solve the problems of our ummah until we solve ourselves. Because that's a failure. That's a failure to see the problems as they are. That's a failure to acknowledge that there is more going on than just the Muslims and their sins and their problems. And it's a cop-out by a very select few nationalistic clerics who don't like the spotlight being put on them. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This has been very painful for me to do. And I love you all for the sake of Allah subhanahu. And I pray. I give my dua and prayer to the young lady who has passed.